Welcome to Critical Thinking Live at Friends of Europe. Earlier this year, Friends of Europe published 10 policy choices for a renewed social contract for Europe. These ideas were crowdsourced from a broad range of stakeholders, and they were refined into actionable messages for the next Commission and the European Parliament mandate. Policy choice number 8 is to boost health innovation for social and economic resilience. Now, that's a big challenge, but I'm delighted to say I've got someone joining me today who's going to help us open that box up and try to understand how we turn that ambition into reality. So welcome to Monica Shaw, who's the Senior Vice President and Head of European Markets at Bristol Myers Squibb. Hello, Monica.
Hi, Tamsin. Real pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Monica, let's start with your personal journey, because you began your professional life as a doctor at the NHS in the UK. Since then, you've had a varied career working in the biopharmaceutical industry, and you've seen healthcare from both perspectives, from both the public sense and the private sector. And you've also accompanied the journey it takes for new medicines to get from development right to the side of the patients. And you know the complexity of that issue. So can you tell us a little bit, looking back over your professional life, what have been the key takeaways? What has your professional journey taught you?
Thank you so much, Tamsin. So, as you say, I started off life in the NHS as a jobbing medical doctor. This was some years ago now. So it was an exciting time in many ways, because it was the start, for example, of the biologics era and some of these diseases to treat. And in fact, I remember a great story about a patient who was coming in to one of our severe psoriasis clinics. And she was a very young lady with really bad psoriasis. And what was really touching about her was that she wasn't worried about the way she looked. She was worried because she couldn't take her small son to the swimming pool. Every time she tried, there's a huge lack of understanding of some of these diseases. And she just felt people were looking and pointing and worried that this was something contagious. And she was one of the people that I first gave a biologic to, and seeing her come back a few weeks later, spring in her step. And again, it wasn't the fact that she looked different. You could just see her whole personality had lifted. And she told us about taking her son to the local swimming pool and how much fun that she'd had. The irony is that this lady was probably somebody that only just qualified for a biologic treatment. So that was also my first experience of matching this excitement of innovation, this excitement of opportunity, of really changing someone's life with the challenges of the reimbursement system that we're facing. And I was lucky that I had a consultant who was able to navigate this. But it was my first exposure to not every patient will automatically get the treatment that they deserve. And this has been something that's been a real passion of mine since I joined the industry. As you say, I've been in many facets of the industry, everything from research and development through to commercialization. One of the proudest things I can talk about is having launched over 15 products in my career. And everyone has faced a similar challenge of how do we make sure that the patient actually gets the treatment that they deserve. And there's a huge component to that in market access, and how we encourage governments to really understand the importance of innovation. Coming to Bristol Myers Squibb, just about 8 or 9 months ago now, we have some really exciting treatments. It was one of the things that drew me to the company. We are launching new products in some really interesting spaces and some high cutting edge innovation. And how do we make sure that all patients, that we really sort of represent health equity, and that all patients benefit from this, is something that's very much at the top of our agenda.
Thank you. I mean, you've talked about the importance of innovation, but of course the challenge, and you mentioned that when you dealt with the NHS bureaucracy, where there's a trade-off between the financial sustainability and getting things that are cutting edge to patients. So it's this notion of sustainable innovation in healthcare that we really need to try and understand. Can you tell me what that means in a European context?
Of course, we're well aware that governments have budgets to handle, pressures to trade off against. And we also know that post-COVID, this issue of healthcare and how we manage the population healthcare is absolutely at the top of everybody's agenda. So when we have these conversations with governments, what we're trying to say is, let's look at this as a problem that we solve together. And you use the word sustainable, which I think is equally as important to us as it is to governments. We have no interest in making medications unaffordable. We want to make sure that we work in partnership, in collaboration, not only with payers, but also with patient groups to ensure that access is equitable across markets. And if you look now, whether it's the time to receive a new treatment or whether it's receiving a new treatment, the experience that you have from one market to another market, from one country to another country, can be very different, even within a country. So I was in Spain a few weeks ago, and I was in the Barcelona region. And in this region, patients were having trouble getting access to one of our new medications. If you went to the region next door, you would, however, be able to access it. So when a patient is having a different experience region to region, let alone country to country, I think this is something that we need to partner on. How do we make this a reality for patients? And as you say, the foundation of that is rewarding innovation and rewarding increased value of medications. That's what really pushes the science forward.
Thank you. This mandate that's just coming to a close a little bit later this year at EU level has seen huge progress towards the idea of a European health union. And I think the key lesson that everyone has clearly learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is the critical importance of collaboration at European scale across borders. We also see that amongst citizens' priorities, when you ask them what's important, investment in health, for obvious reasons because of the last few years, is at the top of their agenda. So from your perspective, what have been the major policy collaboration opportunities of the last few years, and where do we go from here?
Fundamentally, we have the same goals. Fundamentally, we all want Europe to be a place where healthcare and people are able to access the right healthcare. We also have an aligned goal around having Europe as a strong place for research and development and a strong industrial foundation. So we do actually share many common goals. When it comes to how pharma legislation has looked to interpret this, I think we feel that there's been some progress made versus the original suggestions around protection of regulatory protection. However, the original aim of ensuring that access to all is achieved is delinked from what the pharma legislation is trying to reach. And actually, when you look at challenges, if we talk about access particularly, this is usually a national issue. So country to country, payer to payer, each approach is slightly different and has a different approach as to how they handle innovation, how they handle access to medication. So the EU GPL is probably not really reaching the aims that it wants to. And then if we build on that, we would love to see a situation where there is equity of access, but we need to make sure that it's tapped into a process that works. So there is also the EU HTA that's coming through, which is looking to try and have a coherent health technology approach. So this is the approach by which payers assess the value of new drugs. This is something that we want to work on collaboration with to make sure that it, again, achieves its intended aims rather than becoming another hurdle. So for me, it's about how do we work in collaboration to translate what are clearly very aligned goals of having Europe at the forefront of research and innovation, at the forefront of healthcare, into a reality for our patients.
I'm just interested in seeing how you see there being an opportunity for data, because, of course, one of the big achievements of the last couple of years, and it went right down to the wires and sort of 24-hour overnight negotiations in the Parliament, but the European health data space, it potentially offers that opportunity to harness data and really start to make some significant innovative breakthroughs. How do you see that as an opportunity for someone working in pharmaceuticals in Europe?
Absolutely. I mean, research and development is the lifeblood of innovation. It's also a huge industrial contributor. So there's a huge opportunity. But currently, it's sad to say that Europe is starting to lag behind globally, particularly if we start to look at the US, We're now investing substantially less in R&D than the US does. So there is a huge opportunity for us to relook at R&D in Europe to become a place where doing clinical trials is attractive. So speed to recruitment, speed to getting clinical trial sites set up. And then there has to be that strong link then to making those medications that are coming through the research and development organizations available to patients at the end of the day. We have a huge opportunity also with digitization now. It's clear that artificial intelligence is going to be a real enabler. And again, these things can't be achieved alone. So there needs to be strong partnerships, strong collaboration across industry, across healthcare bodies, across payers, across patient groups to make this European vision a reality.
One of the key features of the last year or two has been the new focus in health on manufacturing and supply chains. It's right at the top of the political to-do list. Specifically, they're talking about something called open strategic autonomy. Now, you referred to Europe perhaps losing its place competitively globally. So how does Europe maintain that space as being competitive globally, but also a place to both do discovery and drug development, but also manufacturing?
I think if I take BMS as an example, we are heavily committed to Europe and have been. We have a strong manufacturing footprint. We will be opening a new site in the Netherlands for our advanced technologies, which is a big commitment to Europe. We also have a research facility, Citra, in Spain. So Europe continues to hold a strong place in industry viewpoints when it comes to investing, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's R&D. But if we want to stay competitive, it's about making the whole ecosystem work. So this has to be taken as a whole. Is Europe really going to be competitive from an industrial standpoint? And this means having every chain of the ecosystem working. So being able to do the research and innovation that then pulls through into employing people within those facilities and then making those medications available for patients afterwards. And if we can partner, and actually I think we're now starting to have some interesting conversations that even just at a country level as well, people are seeing the industry as a positive GDP investment. And so when we can get this ecosystem working well, this becomes a win-win because it's good for patients, it's good for investment, and it's good for the companies as well.
I'm particularly interested in getting your ideas for what you would like to see achieved in the next EU mandate. This is the year of musical chairs. We've got European Parliament elections taking place in June. Later this year, there'll be a brand new College of Commissioners who will take office. If you were one of the people who had the chance to put your piece of paper in the dossier that gets handed from one to the other, what would you be putting at the top of the to-do list for the next 5 years?
I love the question. And I think I would anchor back to what we talked about originally, which is how do we have sustainable access to innovation? Because this is the lifeblood that fuels everything that we've discussed now. So it's about having a clear view on making sure that we're not just focused on cost containment. That's a zero-sum game for all concerned. We need to disproportionately reward innovation while managing the sustainability of healthcare budgets and ensuring that we have an environment that rewards R&D and the full process end-to-end ecosystem that allows patients to access that innovation. And I think the great thing is because we have such a commonality of goals in this space, that having an openness to dialogue is foundational to that. The more that we can collaborate, the more that we can understand that we come maybe with different approaches, but trying to address the same solution. Having collaboration and partnership at the center of those discussions, I think is key.
You've had this progression going from working as a clinician at the bedside in a national environment and now working at a European or even beyond. What do you see as the sort of big changes in mindset when you work, in a hospital with specific patients and now having to have a broader view? Because we've been talking about things like sustainable innovation and open strategic autonomy. These are sort of big concepts that sometimes hard to relate to the work you do at the bedside of a patient. So how have you seen a change in mindset?
It's fascinating because as a physician, you deal with the consequences of everything that we've discussed. And to make it very human, you're the person sitting in front of a patient telling them that they can or cannot get a certain treatment. And, with the access to information that patients have these days, they're extremely well educated, more and more so. So they're very well aware of what potential treatments are out there. And the reality of having to sit opposite a patient and say that you can't have a specific treatment, not because it's not a good or safe treatment, but because the ecosystem has failed them, and that's a collective responsibility that we have, is a really tough conversation to have. And so that's the end result of all of these big strategic conversations that we have. And, that's why my personal sort of mission has always been to think about that conversation and make sure that as a patient, you can get in front of a doctor with the expectation that you will receive the best treatment for you without regard for all of this stuff that's happening in the background. And I think if we can get some way to achieving that, that would be a really exciting place to be.
Well, as you say, inequalities in access to treatment are becoming much more visible to policymakers. And there's now being pressure from stakeholders, particularly patient communities, demanding an answer. And I'm sure that will be one of the things that will get quite a lot of attention in this next mandate. And I can see that you're nodding that's something you would welcome, that we really focus in on why can't we make sure that all patients across Europe get access to what they need when they need it. I'd like to sort of finally get a message from you that, BMS, you've mentioned it already, it's a company with a global footprint, and yet you're also quite strong in Europe. So that's a clear vote of confidence in the future of Europe as a place to develop new medicines and to do business. So how do you see your future in Europe?
Obviously, as the head of Region Europe, I'm extremely passionate about the healthcare that we can offer patients and BMS's role in that. We do have a very strong presence in Europe. We're in 22 countries now. We have a good R&D presence. We recruit over 25,000 people into clinical trials, which is a commitment to the ongoing innovation coming through the markets. And we employ over 6,000 people across Europe. So we are hugely invested in Europe. It is a key part of the geography. And I think we really believe in the opportunity for Europe moving forward. And as I say, while we've highlighted a lot of the challenges today, increasingly, as we talked about, there are many stakeholders coming to the table to say, we want Europe to be a strong place in the future. And if we can continue to foster that spirit of collaboration, I think that can make Europe a continued exciting place to invest as a company.
And just on the point of clinical trials, one of the key challenges is that in many areas, women, ethnic minorities are underrepresented. I know that's a big challenge, try and make sure that when we recruit into clinical trials, we're able to draw from a broader population based on they're more representative. Is there anything you can tell us about what's being done from your perspective to address this?
We've just issued our ESG report, and one of our ESG pillars is health equity. And within that, one of the things that we're focused on is increasing representation in clinical studies, because we know that this has been a challenge in the past, and it's something that we're very active in. So one of the ways to do that is increase the patient voice as you design clinical studies, and also measure yourself to hold yourself accountable to some of these metrics. Because when we design new drugs, we need to make sure that they are representation of the population that we serve. And we know that there can be differences regardless of what that sort of different population we represent. So those populations really need to be represented in clinical studies. It's definitely not a done game, but I think when you put it on the agenda, when you're having it at the forefront of your discussions, such as ESG, it shows our commitment to evolving this moving forward. And I think it will be a really big topic to come.
And as a female leader in the healthcare space, do you see a strong potential career path for young women or ethnic minority scientists and researchers who want to come through the system? Are we fostering the next level of talent enough in Europe?
A lot of people will say, as and even I guess in my previous generation, you maybe didn't see role models growing up that allowed you to sort of look to these kinds of careers aspirationally. If I look around me now, and actually if I look at my peers at a BMS level, we are over half female, we have strong ethnic representation, and it's taken a lot of work to get there. We've had to be very deliberate about it. BMS has a very clear diversity inclusion strategy that doesn't just sit on a page, but really feels like we live and breathe it when we walk around the buildings today. But it's clear that more work needs to be done in this space as well. But I think at least starting to see role models in these kinds of roles and having those conversations with people to show that this is possible is an exciting start to that journey, to make sure that everybody sees the opportunity that they can get in the future for these kinds of roles, because we need diverse talent. It's how you make great business decisions beyond what we should do as human beings. It's very clear that the best decisions come from diverse opinions and diverse backgrounds. So it's a business imperative for us as well as being a human one now.
Thank you very much, Monica, for spending time with me today. We began our conversation by me saying that Friends of Europe have set out, 10 key choices, policy choices towards a renewed social contract for Europe. And within that, we said we need to boost health innovation for social and economic resilience. And you've told us a little bit about everything from, diversity of clinical trials, building up the skills for the researchers and the future professionals. You've talked about the legislative framework, the attention to inequalities and making sure we've got proper access, and also recognizing that health is now shifting to being seen as an investment rather than a cost. And that makes a big difference to the way that Europe goes forward. So I'm hoping very much that all of your ideas and your suggestions can be slipped into that dossier that are put on the top desk for the incoming Commission and Parliament. So from your mouth to their ears, thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you again at another Critical Thinking Live.
Thank you so much, Tamsin. It's been a pleasure.